If you walked through any black neighborhood in the 1970s, you would have seen something that seems almost impossible by today's standards. Communities where obesity was rare, children ran until they were exhausted, and adults remained naturally slim without gym memberships or diet plans. This wasn't about genetics or some secret weight loss strategy. It was about a lifestyle that has almost completely disappeared, replaced by sedentary lifestyles, processed foods, and technology that turned movement from a necessity into an optional form of entertainment. To understand why black people remained thin in the 1970s, one must look at every aspect of life during that decade. How children played, how families ate, how communities moved, and how daily survival required physical effort that today's conveniences have eliminated. Here are the real reasons why black people were so naturally fit in the 1970s. The factors that created a lifestyle where staying in shape didn't require conscious effort. Let's chat together about which neighborhoods people lived in during the 1970s and share their memories. 1. Go outside and play wasn't a suggestion, it was the law. Black children in the 1970s spent their entire days outside moving constantly because staying indoors watching television or playing video games simply wasn't an option that parents accepted. After breakfast and before dinner, kids were expected to be outside, on the sidewalk, in the park, in vacant lots, anywhere except sitting in the house. This wasn't optional entertainment. It was a firm parental rule enforced across black neighborhoods, where mothers would literally push children out the door with instructions not to come back until the streetlights came on. The thing nobody tells you is that this forced outdoor time meant hours of continuous physical activity that modern children rarely experience, with kids running, jumping, climbing, and playing games that required constant movement from morning until dark. Tag games turned into full-contact sports that had children sprinting at top speed, dodging and weaving while their hearts pounded. Hide and seek in neighborhoods with alleys, abandoned buildings, and creative hiding spots meant climbing, running, and strategizing across blocks. What many overlook is that this outdoor play wasn't structured or supervised. Kids invented their own games using imagination and whatever materials they found, creating activities that kept them moving far more than organized sports with coaches and scheduled practice times. Stickball, hopscotch, climbing trees, riding bikes until the chains fell off. All of this was just what kids did because alternatives didn't exist. Parents didn't worry about supervision or stranger danger. They trusted the community to watch out for all children while expecting kids to entertain themselves through pure physical activity. The result was children who burned thousands of calories daily without anyone counting, tracking, or scheduling their exercise, staying naturally lean through play that felt like freedom rather than fitness. How many hours did you spend outside playing as a child compared to how much time today's kids spend outdoors? 2. Double Dutch jump rope was cardio disguised as culture. The rhythmic slap of two ropes turning in opposite directions while a jumper performed intricate footwork in the middle wasn't just playground entertainment. It was intense cardiovascular exercise that black girls in the 1970s performed for hours without realizing they were getting world-class workout. Double Dutch required two people turning long ropes in opposite rotations while one or more jumpers entered, jumped complex patterns, and exited without missing a beat, creating an activity that demanded timing, coordination, endurance, and serious leg strength. The thing nobody tells you is that serious Double Dutch participants were athletes by any modern definition, with jump sessions lasting hours as girls waited their turn, studied techniques, and pushed themselves to master increasingly difficult moves. Competitive teams emerged in the early 1970s, particularly after the Fantastic Four from New York gained fame, but on neighborhood blocks, Double Dutch remained raw and unstructured. Just girls with ropes, a stretch of sidewalk, and determination to jump until their legs gave out. What many overlook is that Double Dutch wasn't gendered exercise or deliberately physical training. It was cultural expression and social activity that happened to require incredible cardiovascular fitness and leg strength. Girls would jump at recess, after school, on weekends, and during summer months, accumulating hours of high-intensity interval training without anyone calling it that or recognizing it as formal exercise. The community aspect meant no one jumped alone. Spectators clapped and chanted, creating social pressure to keep going even when exhausted, pushing endurance far beyond what individual motivation might achieve. Parents kept spare ropes hanging by the door next to house keys, and grandmothers who jumped double dutch in their own youth would demonstrate footwork and cheer from stoops, making this intense exercise feel like family tradition rather than workout routine. The cardiovascular benefits of sustained jumping combined with the leg muscle development from constant landings created lean, strong bodies without anyone ever stepping into a gym. Did you jump double dutch, and can you still remember the rhymes and footwork patterns you learned? 3. Soul Train turned every living room into a dance studio. Saturday afternoons belonged to Don Cornelius and Soul Train, the television show that didn't just broadcast music but inspired black families across America to clear furniture and dance in their living rooms with the same energy as the performers on screen. The show featured the Soul Train line, dancers strutting down an aisle formed by clapping spectators, performing their signature moves while America watched and learned. The thing nobody tells you is that Soul Train created a cultural phenomenon where dancing became expected rather than optional, with families and friends gathering to watch the show and then immediately recreating what they'd seen, practicing steps until they perfected them. The robot, the locking, the bump, these weren't just named dance moves, but physical activities that required coordination, muscle control, and sustained movement that burned serious calories while feeling like pure entertainment. What many overlook is that dancing wasn't confined to Soul Train Saturdays. It extended to parties, family gatherings, and spontaneous sessions whenever music played, creating a culture where movement to music was as natural as breathing. Church services included dancing, weddings featured long dance segments, and birthday parties weren't complete without someone organizing a Soul Train line where every guest had to take their turn performing. The social pressure to dance well meant people practiced, developing skills while simultaneously maintaining cardiovascular fitness and flexibility that kept bodies lean and limber. Dancing wasn't exercise. It was expression, celebration, and community bonding that happened to provide intense physical activity without anyone consciously trying to work out. Parents danced with children, teaching moves and cultural connection while everyone burned calories through movement that felt like joy rather than obligation. What Soul Train dances can you still do, and how often did dancing happen in your household during the 1970s? 4. Block parties meant hours of dancing on concrete. When warm weather arrived, black neighborhoods transformed streets into dance floors by blocking off traffic, setting up massive speakers, and gathering entire communities for parties that lasted from afternoon until the next morning. Block parties weren't occasional events, but regular occurrences that brought everyone outside to dance under open sky until their feet hurt and their bodies were soaked with sweat. The thing nobody tells you is that these parties represented hours of continuous physical activity disguised as social gathering, with DJs playing sets that kept people moving through funk, soul, and the emerging sounds of hip-hop. In the early 1970s, these block parties became the birthplace of hip-hop culture, with youth laying cardboard boxes on asphalt and battling through breaking, popping, and locking. Dance forms so physically demanding they required athletic conditioning that rivaled any sport. What many overlook is that block parties weren't just for young people. They brought entire communities together across generations, with elders dancing alongside teenagers, while children ran between dancers in games that added to the general atmosphere of movement and celebration. Tables lined streets with homemade food, but eating was secondary to dancing, with people grabbing quick bites between songs before returning to the crowd to keep moving. The social nature meant you couldn't sit down without someone pulling you back up to dance, creating peer pressure that kept everyone active for the entire event. These gatherings provided community bonding, cultural celebration, and hours of cardiovascular exercise that nobody counted as working out, but that kept entire neighborhoods lean through collective movement. The concrete surfaces and outdoor settings meant no climate control or comfortable seating, so staying active was easier than finding somewhere to rest. How long could you dance continuously at block parties, and what songs always got everyone on on their feet. 5. Roller skating rinks were weekly cardio sessions. Saturday nights meant lacing up four-wheeled skates and spending hours gliding around polished wood floors under mirror balls, while soul and funk music set the rhythm for skating that was as much dance as transportation. Black roller skating rinks in the 1970s weren't just entertainment venues, but community institutions where everyone knew each other, where signature moves were practiced and perfected, and where staying on wheels for entire evenings provided serious exercise without anyone thinking of it as fitness training. The thing nobody tells you is that rhythm skating, the distinctive style that emerged in black rinks, where skaters moved to music with choreographed steps and synchronized movements, required balance, leg strength, and cardiovascular endurance that created lean, muscular bodies. Legendary rinks became temples of skating culture, where regular attendees practiced intricate footwork for weeks to perfect spins, crossovers, and backward glides that let them hold their own during informal competitions. What many overlook is that roller skating sessions lasted hours, not minutes, with people arriving when doors opened and staying until closing without sitting down, except for quick snack breaks between songs. The combination of constant movement, balance requirements, and leg muscle engagement meant roller skating provided comprehensive lower body workouts while feeling like pure entertainment. Teens carried their own skates in drawstring bags, wheels freshly tightened and laces color-coordinated with outfits, treating their equipment with the seriousness athletes give sporting gear. The social aspect meant you couldn't skip Saturday skating without missing out on community gathering, creating consistency that turned weekly skating into sustained exercise routines without the formality of gym schedule. How often did you skate, and can you still remember your signature skating moves from the 1970s? 6. Walking was transportation, not optional exercise. In 1974, 20% of U.S. households owned no car, and more than 65% of people lacked immediate access to vehicles, meaning that walking was simply how black families got everywhere, to school, church, work, grocery stores, and anywhere else they needed to go. This wasn't recreational walking or intentional exercise, but necessary transportation that meant covering miles daily on foot while carrying groceries, pushing strollers, and managing daily life without the convenience of personal vehicle. The thing nobody tells you is that this forced walking created baseline physical activity levels that kept everyone lean without any conscious effort toward fitness, with daily steps accumulating into serious cardiovascular exercise and leg muscle development. Kids walked to school in groups, covering multiple blocks while racing, playing, and arriving with flushed faces and elevated heart rates that prepared them for learning. Mothers walked to markets and back carrying bags of groceries, turning shopping into strength training that built arm and leg muscles through practical necessity. What many overlook is that relying on buses meant more walking, to stops, from stops, and running to catch buses that wouldn't wait, adding bursts of high-intensity movement throughout days. Grocery shopping required sturdy wagons or carts on wheels that turned errands into full-body workouts as people pulled weight up hills and navigated sidewalks while managing their loads. Every errand demanded movement, every destination required steps, and all these practical journeys accumulated into activity levels far exceeding what modern car-dependent lifestyles provide. Communities were more compact, with essential services within walking distance, but even those short walks added up when repeated multiple times daily for different purposes. How far did you walk daily during the 1970s, and how does that compare to your walking today? 7. Home-cooked meals from scratch meant real food, not processed chemicals. Before fast food chains invaded black neighborhoods and before processed foods filled grocery store shelves, black families ate home-cooked meals made from actual ingredients, vegetable, meats, grains, that required preparation, cooking, and eating with families around table. Mothers and grandmothers stood over stoves, chopping, seasoning, and simmering, creating meals that took time but provided nutrition that processed alternatives can't match. The thing nobody tells you is that eating real food rather than chemical-laden processed products makes dramatic differences in how bodies process nutrients and maintain healthy weights, with home cooking automatically providing better nutrition even when using inexpensive ingredients. Soul food traditions meant collard greens simmered with ham hock, fried chicken made from fresh poultry, macaroni and cheese baked from real cheese rather than powder, and cornbread made from actual cornmeal mixed by hand. What many overlook is that cooking from scratch takes time and energy, meaning families couldn't eat constantly or mindlessly snack because preparing food required effort that naturally limited consumption. Desserts were treats for special occasions, not daily expectations, with sweet potato pie appearing on Sundays and cookies being homemade in batches that lasted rather than endless packages from stores. Portions were modest because large dinner plates hadn't yet become standard, with 8 or 9-inch plates holding appropriate serving sizes rather than the massive portions that modern restaurants and home dining now consider normal. The absence of high-fructose corn syrup, artificial flavors, and preservatives meant food satisfied hunger naturally without triggering the overconsumption that engineered processed foods create. What home-cooked meals do you remember most from the 1970s, and how do they compare to what you eat now? 8. Corner stores sold real snack, not supersized junk. When black kids in the 1970s stopped at corner stores for snacks, they bought sunflower seeds, pickles in brine, roasted peanuts in paper bags, and penny candy in quantities they could afford with literal pocket change. Not supersized sodas, value meals, or processed snacks engineered to trigger overconsumption. These small purchases meant limited calories consumed between meals, with snacks that were closer to real food than the chemical creations that would later dominate stores. The thing nobody tells you is that obesity rates began climbing when eating outside the home jumped from 9.4% of total caloric intake in 1977 to 1978 to over 21% by the mid-1990s, representing a fundamental shift in how and what black communities ate. In the early 1970s, fast food chains were rare in black neighborhoods, and when families did eat out, they went to soul food restaurants that used real ingredients and traditional cooking methods rather than industrial food production. What many overlook is that school lunches were packed at home in brown paper bags, sandwiches on wheat bread, apple, small homemade cookies, providing controlled portions of real food rather than cafeteria processed meals or vending machine access. The absence of drive-thrus and delivery apps meant eating required going somewhere and sitting down, creating natural limits on consumption that modern convenience has eliminated. Mothers measured ingredients from canisters, baking from scratch rather than opening boxes of mixes loaded with chemicals designed to extend shelf life and maximize profits regardless of nutritional impact. What corner store snacks do you remember buying with pocket change during the 1970s? 9. No screens meant constant movement. In the 1970s, most American households had one screen, a television with rabbit ear antennas, compared to the 8 screens average households had by 2015 and the 17 screens they have by 2024, representing a fundamental shift in how time is spent and how sedentary daily life has become. Black families negotiated viewing schedules like diplomats, with Saturday morning cartoons being sacred, but everything shutting off once they ended so kids would go outside. The thing nobody tells you is that limited screen time meant children had no choice but to find entertainment through physical activity, creating childhoods where movement was constant rather than occasional breaks from sitting. Living rooms featured family photos rather than rows of glowing rectangles, and children waited all week for favorite shows, spending the rest of their time running, playing, and inventing games that required nothing but imagination and space. What many overlook is that boredom wasn't something to fix with devices, but fuel for creativity and movement, pushing kids to create their own entertainment through physical activities that burned calories and built strength. Board games came out on rainy days. Monopoly, checkers, Trouble, providing interactive entertainment that still required more engagement than passive screen watching. Stories were told out loud, passed from grandparents to grandchildren in real time rather than consumed through screens, maintaining family connections while eliminating hours of sedentary behavior. The absence of smartphones, tablets, computers, and video game systems meant that recreation inherently involved more movement and less sitting. How many hours of television did you watch daily during the 1970s compared to total screen time today? 10. Physical education was serious business, not optional. Students in the 1970s endured gym class that felt like boot camp, with teachers leading push-ups until arms shook, sit-ups counted out loud, rope climbs that left palms burning, and shuttle runs where students sprinted back and forth until their lungs screamed. The presidential physical fitness test wasn't optional, but a national standard that every kid had to meet, creating expectations that physical capability mattered and that schools were responsible for ensuring students developed strength and endurance. The thing nobody tells you is that physical education wasn't the joke it became in later decades, but serious training that built fitness levels in all students regardless of athletic talent or interest in sports. Teachers led stretching routines on cinder tracks and grassy fields, making everyone run laps during recess, whether they wanted to or not, creating mandatory movement that kept students active beyond just PE class. What many overlook is that playground equipment like climbing ropes, balance beams, and giant parachute encouraged movement and competition that built strength while feeling like play rather than. Early fitness advocates argued that modern lifestyles were making people soft compared to previous generations whose daily lives required physical activity, so the government introduced mandatory fitness testing to combat sedentary trends. Earning patches or certificates for high scores meant something, proof that you'd worked hard, pushed through, and met standards that recognized physical fitness as important achievement. Do you remember your presidential physical fitness test scores? And could you meet those standards today? Black people stayed lean in the 1970s not through conscious dieting or gym memberships, but through living in ways that made fitness automatic. Walking everywhere, dancing constantly, playing outside for hours, eating real food cooked at home, and existing in communities where physical activity was woven into the fabric of daily life. This wasn't about having superior willpower or better genetics. It was about a lifestyle that modern conveniences, processed foods, and sedentary entertainment have systematically destroyed. The obesity epidemic that followed didn't happen because people suddenly became lazy or stopped caring about health. It happened because the entire structure of daily life changed in ways that eliminated natural movement and replaced real food with engineered products designed to maximize consumption and profits. Understanding what was lost helps explain what needs to be recovered, though returning to 1970s lifestyles isn't realistic when cars are necessary. When both parents work demanding jobs that leave little time for cooking from scratch, and when screens dominate every aspect of modern existence. But recognizing that Black communities once stayed naturally lean through cultural practices, community structures, and daily necessities that kept everyone moving, offers lessons about what truly drives health beyond individual choices. The children who grew up running until streetlights came on, dancing at every gathering, and eating home-cooked meals remember bodies that stayed lean without effort, and that memory reveals what modern life has taken away in the name of convenience and profit.